Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. This afternoon I am joined by Chanda Mwale. Chanda Mwale is a member, rather, or in the management team for the Wildlife Producers Association of Zambia, and she'll be talking to us about a number of things relating to wildlife. And there could be some of you who consume game meat. I love game meat. I think it tastes splendid. Probably one of the most tasty meats that you can ever have. But also there are issues to it. We need to know. There are some of you who want to get into this as a business. Those of you who consume game meat like me, we need to get more details on this. Without wasting much time, let's introduce our guest for today. Chanda, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Dr. Mujajati. How are you doing?
I hope you had lunch.
I did actually. I had Shima with some wondering.
Right, right. Believe it or not, this is tea.
We can't know if we can't see what's inside, so
No, I do
we'll take
drink
it.
very hot. I do drink very hot tea in the middle of the day like this.
Hmm.
It's got nothing to do with health. I think it's just habit.
Okay. Does it help you
Right.
cool down?
No, actually, I think it actually helps like calm my nerves, especially when I'm very busy or when I'm under a lot of pressure.
Huh, that's good for you.
So tell me, Chanda, tell us about yourself. So who is Chanda Mwale? What's your background?
Okay, Chanda. I'm many things to many people. But primarily I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a mother to one beautiful girl. I work with the Wildlife Producers Association of Zambia. I'm currently their operations manager, which means I'm helping run our first full-time secretariat. My background is in geography and environmental management, and I've worked in conservation for the last 10 years of my career.
Right. So tell
Hmm.
us about the Wildlife Producers Association. When did the association form? Why was the association formed? What's this association about?
Awesome. So the Wildlife Producers Association of Zambia, WPAZ, has been in existence since 1988. So it's been around a while. The primary goal of the association is to build Zambia's wildlife economy. And the wildlife economy really encompasses wildlife habitat, and the entire scope of different economic activities that can bring benefit within the wildlife economy. The association also exists primarily to ensure we stimulate interest of Zambians in this sector. We centralize data and information. We also lobby and advocate government because there are obviously still quite a number of issues that need to be ironed out to make this industry a lot more enabling, so to speak. And then we are membership based, so we want to increase our numbers. We want to have as many members as we possibly can because the more members that we have, um, the bigger our scope and the bigger our voice in trying to grow this industry.
So tell me, so when did this association start? Like, when did you start, and who qualifies to be a member?
Awesome. So the association started in 1988, and the people who qualify to be members, we've got different tiers of membership. We have full members and we also have associate members. Our full members are those people who are in the game ranching industry. So they own a ranch, whether it's a massive ranch of 20,000 plus hectares or it's an ornamental game farm on the outskirts of Lusaka. There are different tiers to our membership. And then we also have associate members who are people that are interested in the industry, people who are part of the value chain, as we call it. So, for example, a butcher in Lusaka, we have members such as Delicasa. Delicasa is a member of WPAZ. They are a butchery, but they're also a member of our association. And then we also have people who are just interested in the sector, right? They care about wildlife and they care about the work that we do as an association. And those are also our associate members. And then we have a few honorary members. So from the Department of National Parks, as well as the Department of Veterinary Services, those two institutions, although they regulate us, they are also honorary members because they need to be part of the day-to-day work that we do to make sure that our work and our members are also aligned to the legislation.
Now, help us understand the difference between legal and illegal game meat. What's the issue there? How can I tell? What's the difference? What's the basic difference?
That's a great question, a question we get often. So, in terms of nomenclature, which is like the names, illegal bushmeat is the stuff that is basically you cannot trace the source. You're not sure what meat it is. You're not sure how it got to where it is that somebody is selling it. And it's often that meat that comes from people's booths and it's presented to us in sacks and so on in our offices, right? It also does not have the legal paperwork that it needs to have. So the Department of National Parks, working together with the vet department, have put together regulations that safeguard our health as people. So what often is the case with legal game meat, which you find in a formal establishment, you find it in a hotel or a lodge that has legal paperwork, is you can trace the meat back. You know, it's if you ask somebody, do they have the paperwork for trading and selling that game meat, or do they have proof of the source of that meat? Often that's how you can tell the difference between legal and illegal. And also with the "This is not a game" campaign, most entities that are selling legal game meat have that beautiful sticker from DNPW and WCP, which is the buffalo saying legal game meat.
What what has your organization been doing to promote legal game meat, both in terms of farming and also production of this very important resource? What have you been doing? What activities have you been doing to promote that?
That's an awesome question, Doc. So we've been doing a couple of things. We've been working quite closely with the government in trying to see how we can create a more enabling environment for people to come into the industry. We've been lobbying heavily on behalf of our members and the general industry that we need to lower the barriers to entry, so that we get more people who are involved in producing legal game meat. We've also been doing a lot of communications work, trying to get our name as an association out there so people start to understand who we are, what we do, and what scope and opportunity there is in this industry. We've also been working very closely with partners such as various partners that help us get our name out there and help more people understand the value of game meat and the industry. And then also we've been pushing our members, to get more meat to market, or as much meat to market as they possibly can. We are aware that we have a big shortfall between supply and demand, but we are trying to encourage our members to get legal meat onto the market. But linked to that also are the economics and what it costs to get the meat to the market. There's so many associated costs, running the ranch itself, the security to make sure that your game is not poached, setting up the necessary infrastructure to make sure that those animals are culled and that they are transported in a safe way for consumption. So that's some of the work we're doing, communicating, lobbying, trying to get more people to understand, but also capacity building. We are working very hard to try and build the capacity of those who want to start out in the industry. We've noted that people are curious about game meat. How does somebody get started? but there doesn't seem to be enough information out there. So one of the things we're doing as an association is to try and disseminate information about the industry. What does somebody need? How do they get started? And which government departments should they be speaking to in order to be right with the law as they get started in this industry?
You talked about barriers to entry, and one of the barriers you talked about is cost. The cost of securing the animals, the cost of moving the animals, especially if you're farming. Now, there's this argument. Is it that illegal game meat is easier to acquire because it's cheaper than legal game meat? What's your comment on that? Is illegal game meat cheaper than legal game meat?
That's a very interesting debate, and really, if and where you find illegal meat cheaper than legal meat, it is primarily because the person who gets the illegal meat to the market doesn't have to bear the different costs that somebody who's selling meat legally. A good example, even in just like the beef industry, for those the cattle rustlers, the meat that you buy that was stolen off of somebody's farm is much cheaper than the meat that you buy in a butchery, for the simple reason that the person who stole didn't have to feed the animal, didn't have to factor in all the different costs to get the animal to where it is. However, the price of fresh game meat is still quite competitive, because if you're getting it from source, so from a rancher, you could get it from between 65 to 70 kwacha per kilogram. That's the fresh meat. So that is still relatively competitive when you compare the price of beef. Another thing is, what type of cost are we talking about? Cost to health or just cost on your pocket? With the legal meat, you know that this is properly taken care of meat. You know that it's safe for consumption, and you know that you're not risking your life. Whereas with the illegal stuff, you don't know what you're eating, you don't know how it's being killed, what it's been taken to conceal that meat, and what diseases that meat might carry, and therefore the illnesses that it would cost you. We often say, and you're a doctor, so there's you can't put a price on life, right? So in the grand scheme of things, really legal game meat will still work out cheaper for you than the illegal stuff. However, we have the preconceived ideas, notions, because it's habit. We've been doing it for many, many decades. We've sort of programmed ourselves to think that that is much cheaper than the legal stuff. In actual fact, it is not.
Right. Since you and your association, you are in this space where you're trying to promote legal game meat, both farming and production. With regards to management of wildlife, what are some of the key threats that you have either observed or encountered, or what your organization is really bothered about?
So, the threats are there's a lot of threats towards wildlife management, but a lot of them, so at a big scale, large scale, I'll start, overall, and then come down to almost like at farm level. Broadly speaking, some of the biggest threats we have is improper land use planning. We're not giving nature the space that it needs. We're quite haphazard in how we build things. We seem almost obsessed with infrastructure and the idea that infrastructure is what we need more than anything. But we forget that a resilient ecosystem, so a resilient landscape, is really where our wealth is. So we should not try to only have one of anything. The more of different things we have at a broad scale, the more resilient we will be to things like droughts, to things like floods, because Mother Nature as a whole is a lot more healthy. With wildlife management, for example, on a ranch or a farm level, some of the biggest threats are security. So poaching results in huge losses for most of our members. But also, there's quite a lot of mindset change that needs to happen when it comes to wildlife management and the importance of nature, our culture, and the value that it brings. We almost have the idea that there is no value to nature, but there is great value to nature. We just have to be sure that we capture that value and use nature sustainably. And that's how we'll be able to manage for a lot of these threats. But habitat loss and also losing species for prey species, et cetera, and almost collapsing the ecosystem. Those are some of the greatest threats.
You see, this is what happens when you're live on Facebook. Somebody walked into my office and I was telling them to. Now, Chanda, tell us. There are people who are watching us right now. I've even seen a question from somebody. There are people who may be interested in game ranching. What are the steps do they need? What steps do they need to take to get into this space as a game rancher? So just walk us through what one needs to do to get into game ranching.
That's a brilliant question. So I would answer that question in two parts. What you need to get started are obviously the resources, right? You need the land, you need the space, you need enough vegetation for the animals to be able to consume, but also water to feed the animals. So that's from an ecological perspective. And then on the other side, which is the formal process that you need to take, the best place to start is at the Department of National Parks and Wildlife in Chilanga. When you visit DMPW, please do not be threatened. I know they've got rangers there at the front there. Don't be afraid. Just go there, state your business. They'll show you to the administrative block, and then the people at admin will guide you properly. But my point is that the Department of National Parks have got a clear steps and processes that you need to follow. You apply your interest. You would need to do an ecological assessment. The ecological assessment is where basically you get an ecologist to check this piece of land. If I, Chanda, today say on my farm, I would like to have game. Somebody who is qualified needs to come and take a look at that space, right? To let me know whether it is viable for animals, which animals can be there, is there enough food and water for those animals, right? So together with stating my intent, as well as that assessment, what is called an ecological assessment, you would go back to the Department of National Parks and follow their, I think it's almost a 10-step process of the things that you need to do in order to start a game ranch. But the Department of National Parks is the official authority. Ourselves as Wildlife Producers Association can hold your hand through the process should you choose to become a member. And then we'll guide you where we can, but always falling back on the mandate that sits with the Department of National Parks in Chilanga. Dr. Mujajati, is it my internet or yours?
Hello? Chanda, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. You froze for a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
I think we had a blip on either side. I had a blip on my end. You had a blip on your end as well. I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Now we're okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, good. So it's good that we're even going towards the end of the program. But you also talked about the issue of you as an association. You do a lot of hand-holding for people who want to get into, game farming. So walk us through the type of hand-holding that you do as an association for somebody who wants to get into, farming of game meat. What would you say to somebody who wants to say, okay, look, I want to get into this business? What would you say to them?
Sure. So for anybody who's interested, so for anybody who would be interested in joining our association, or getting involved in this industry, I would invite them to visit our Facebook page, the Wildlife Producers Association of Zambia, and also our website where we have our contact details. The type of hand holding we're able to do is we have sitting within the association a lot of technical expertise. There's a lot of people who've been doing this for decades, right? There's a great resource within and among our members for those who are starting out. I'll give an example, and I won't mention the member by name, but they started off in this industry maybe five years ago. They became a member of WPAZ, I think 3 or so years ago. And they have mentioned to me that the things that they're able to learn, because we have a members WhatsApp group, the things that they've been able to learn through just that very simple interaction, being able to ask questions to existing members, being able to ask for advice, has been invaluable. And it's a lot of, information that they would otherwise not be sure where to start, head or tail. That's number one. Number two, we're also working as an association on releasing a number of publications. So please also follow us on Facebook to help guide those who are starting out in the industry. Bite size. We often joke that Zambians, we don't like to read. So we are working on summarizing a few things so you can understand broadly how, when, where to start. But as an association that, we exist to try and encourage more people to take this on, we're more than happy to help you where we can. Administrative issues, introduce you to the right people at Department of National Parks if need be, and help you along your way as we try to grow this industry collectively.
Here's my final thought, and I need your take on this. There's also a thought that game ranching, or this business of producing game meat legally and farming, is a preserve of either the elite, people who are very rich, or white people generally. What's your take on that?
So that question is, and it's a mindset and a sort of thought process that has prevailed over time. I would say primarily because of the history of this industry and the history of our country as well, where we've come from vis-a-vis where we are today. However, I would say that if you look at the things that you require to enter the industry, which is land, capital resources, and I will admit it can be capital intensive. That I won't run away from. Definitely, it can be quite capital intensive. But you need land, you need some capital to start, and some experience to get going. I would argue that we do have Zambians with those resources, and they would be able to get going. Another thing to note is that there's been a growth in what are called community game ranches. The government made the declaration in 2018 to encourage communities to get involved in game ranching. And there are funds from quite a number of donors that want to empower communities to own their wildlife, to have these ranches and utilize it. So what I would encourage all of us to do is really move away from a them versus us attitude when it comes to wildlife and wildlife resources, because these resources belong to all of us as Zambians. If there is value to be captured or created in the supply chain of game meat, remember, it's not just about having the farm and the animals. You could become, if you own a butchery, you could look into getting a legal license, a license to trade. There's different points. If you own a restaurant, you can also look into getting tying yourself back to a legal butchery, who then ties himself to a farm, right? If you are involved in feed, animal feed, you could find a ranch that perhaps supplement some of the feed for the animals. You become a supplier. You look into the chemicals that might be required for dipping the animals, you get involved. So there's a lot of touch points for the industry. And we really need to move away from that perception of them versus us, the elites, those who have the money, the capital, etc., versus us who do not. And let's get our hands stuck in. Let's ask the difficult questions. Let's have the tough conversations. But let's also be solutions oriented. Let's work on getting more and more of us involved and get this show on the road, because Zambia has great potential, but we still lag behind our neighbors. Regionally, you go to South Africa, they'll sing about the beautiful genetics of Zambian sable. Where is Zambia now? Why aren't we on the map? And why is our industry so much smaller than South Africa's?
Chanda, I'd like to thank you very much for having come through. And as we come to a close, what is your final message? If people should forget everything we talked about, what should they remember?
What should they remember? Legalize it, buy legal game meat. There's so many butcheries in many of our towns selling it. And join WPAZ. Become a member of our association. Reach out. Let's see how we can grow this industry and create value and jobs for Zambians.
Right, Chanda, I'd like to thank you most sincerely. Do have a nice day. And I hope next time we invite you, you will make it.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Take care. Okay, so there you have it. And in summary, as Chanda said, our guest said, is that you see, you can also get involved in legal game meat trade, either at a point of a butchery or at a point of production itself, where you own your own ranch. And like she said, it's not exclusive. But also, she was also very candid in telling you that to own a ranch is quite capital intensive, but otherwise it is not impossible. Why? Because her association they are endowed with both experiential and literature knowledge to make sure that they give you a safe landing should you want to go into this space. So utilize these opportunities, and the key issue here, like she emphasized, our ecosystem, we need to be able to coexist and survive as long as possible between wildlife and ourselves. As we conserve wildlife, we are also conserving our own lives. We are also conserving and promoting economic activity. That said, do take care, and like we keep saying, this is not a game.